of anytime you drive in our area, what's the first thing you start to see? Barbed wire. Why fencing? Because you're raising cattle and livestock. And that's what the land is for, right? Of course, part of this is the extermination of the buffalo, and we have to put this in our notes as well. It is one of the true tragedies. The ways to define this are mind-boggling. I mean, there's so many different ways to talk about it. One is the statistics alone of the number of buffalo imagined roaming the plains. They're into the millions, the number of buffalo. There was a story that said that you could walk from Denver to Omaha on the eastern side of Nebraska and not miss stepping on buffalo bones. So many buffaloes have been killed. So many buffaloes have been slaughtered for their hide, predominantly for their hide and for their horns, not for their meat. And of course, many native indigenous populations starved to death as the buffalo began to be exterminated and they began to move out of certain parts and regions. I'm finishing now on 616. I hope you're reading it with me. Last paragraph on 616, follow along. One such ill-fated tribe was the Nez of the Pacific Northwest, when an 1863 treaty reduced the size of the tribe's lands to a small reservation in Idaho. Some of you have actually driven very closely or even through this area. A group of the Nez continued living outside the reservation boundaries in Oregon's Walla Walla Valley. They were allowed to do so until 1877, when General Oliver O. Howard issued an ultimatum. Unwilling to concede, Nez Perce leader, Chief Joseph, there are his dates, 1840 to 1904, and 600 of his people fled northeast through the mountains of Montana toward the Canadian border, hotly pursued by legions of soldiers, and finally weakened by the onset of winter. The Nez Perce were compelled to admit defeat. The speech in which Chief Joseph surrenders contains some of the most achingly beautiful words ever spoken. We're going to do now two things. The introduction is over. Our first observations will be a very interesting document, a journal that was kept by Miriam Davis Colt. I'm on page 617. Read with me. Miriam Davis Colt and her family. I'm reading background. I hope you're reading it with me on 617. Miriam Davis Colt and her family were among a group of families forming a vegetarian commune in the Kansas Territory. The personal history from which this excerpt is taken was published in, you'll want to write it down, 1862. Now, of course, that's a significant year because that's the second year of the American Civil War. So while the American Civil War is happening on the eastern side of the Mississippi, on the western side of the Mississippi, you have this Western expansionism thing going on, right? She wrote under the title of Went to Kansas, being a thrilling account of an ill-fated expedition to that fairyland and its sad results. For those of you that like to dream about a car you may someday purchase or a truck that you may someday buy, look closely at the picture on 617. Go ahead. I dare you to look at that picture on 617. That is what people rode to get out west. That was their mode of transportation. Okay? For those of you that like to travel at 70 plus miles an hour on an interstate, on I-80 or elsewhere, can you imagine coming out west in that? Let's listen now to a presentation. Notice starting January the 5th. Now, we know about January out here, don't we? Can you imagine? That's your mode of transportation. Let's just keep it personal, shall we? That's your mode of transportation from Casper to Worland. You got to do that. Wait a minute, I'm not done. In January. And wait a minute, I'm still not done. There's not any kind of 7-Eleven or Maverick's convenience store along the way. Whatever it is you're going to eat, you got to take with you in that. And that's how you're going in January, in January. And women and children are going to attend. It's not just going to be men doing this project. Let's listen now. The best way to take annotative notes here is to simply write down the dates in level 1. So you just write down a date and one thing it is that you want to remember from this reading. That's the easiest way to prepare for the examination. All right, here we go. It's called Heading West. Hey, this will change the way you think about your traveling from Denver to Worland. Trust me. Watch this. Some of the challenges along the way.
Heading West by Miriam Davis Colt. January 5th, 1856. We are going to Kansas. The vegetarian company that has been forming for many months has finally organized, formed its constitution, elected its directors, and is making all necessary preparations for the spring settlement. We can have, I think, good faith to believe that our directors will fulfill on their part, and we, as settlers of a new country, by going in a company, will escape the hardships attendant on families going in singly, and at once find ourselves surrounded by improving society in a young and flourishing city. It will be better for ourselves pecuniarily and better in the future for our children. My husband has long been a practical vegetarian, and we expect much from living in such a genial clime, where fruit is so quickly grown, and with people whose tastes and habits will coincide with our own.
Now, it's easy to laugh out loud when you read something like this, but two things I want to point out. Notice she says we're going to a quote-unquote new country. Well, I've already explained to you, dude, there was nothing new about this country to the tens of thousands of tribal peoples who lived out here on these plains. This was their country. This was their land. There wasn't anything new about the country at all. In other words, notice that she writes as if coming out here, this is empty land. As if nobody else is here. New country. Notice the second thing she says is, we're going out to a city. Well, she's going to be a little bit shocked when she finally gets to her quote-unquote city. For those of you that like cowboy movies, you can already be writing down probably your favorite movie or video game that shows some kind of Old West quote-unquote city. All right, here we go. Let's go ahead and follow along some of the challenges associated with the heading out west. Hey, you know enough about months of the year to know what weather is like. For example, January.
January 15th. We are making every necessary preparation for our journey and our home in Kansas. My husband has sold his farm, purchased shares in the company, sent his money as directed by HS Club. I am very busy in repairing all of our clothing, looking over bags of pieces, tearing off and reducing down, bringing everything into as small a compass as possible so that we shall have no unnecessary baggage. April 15th. Have been here in West Stockholm at my brother's since Friday last. Have visited mother. Very hard, for in all probability it is the last visit we shall have until we meet where parting never comes. Believe we have said everything we can think of to say. April 16th.
Top of page 618, please.
New York. Bade our friends goodbye in Potsdam this morning at the early hour of 2 o'clock. April 22nd. Have been on the cars again since yesterday morning. Last night was a lovely moonlit night, a night of thought, as we sped almost with lightning speed along in the moonlight past the rail fences. Found ourselves in this miserable hotel before we knew it. Miserable fare, herring boiled with cabbage, miserable dirty beds, and an odor pervading the house that is not at all agreeable. Mistress gone. April 23rd. On board steamer Cataract, bound for Kansas City. April 24th. A hot summer day. The men in our company are out in the city purchasing wagons and farming implements to take along on the steamer up to Kansas City. April 20th.
We'll go ahead and just pause for a moment. Did you notice what she said about April? A hot summer day? April. She's got no idea what July's going to be like out in the Midwest, huh? Right? In other words, the expectation was that when you showed up out here, there would be beautiful hotels waiting for you. There would be nice, cool days. She's in April, and she thinks it's a hot summer day. Only tells you what's coming for her, huh? Right?
28. The steamer struck a snag last night, gave us a terrible jar, tore off a part of the kitchen. Ladies much frightened. Willie is not very well. The water is bad. It affects all strangers. April 30th. Here we are, at Kansas City, all safely again on terra firma. Hasten to the hotel. Find it very much crowded. Go up, 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 and upstairs to our lodging rooms.
I want to pause for a moment and just look back at that last one. It's a big one. You want to write it down. It's one of those that a lot of times my juniors, when I start talking about this, they go, oh, I never really thought about that. Did you see what she said about the water? Did you write that down at level 1? I hope that you did. Notice what she said about the water. Again, I'm working with you at April 28th. Notice she says, the water is bad. It affects all strangers. See, this is one of those things where I love to teach something that makes you go, I never thought about that. When was the last time you drank water that came out of a well in the ground? Not that water that's artesian that you're turning on when you turn on your faucet. Well, what are you talking about? Dude, you just get a bottle of water. That's all you... Yeah. So the challenge coming out west is, where do you get your water from? And how do you keep water not getting bad, turning bad? Because once water turns bad, right, then you can have all kinds of serious issues. Well, they finally make it to Kansas City, and they think they're west. Of course, you laugh, right? Because Kansas City you think of as east, don't you, right? Of course, Kansas City was some kind of small town in the middle of nowhere, but it was the best you had for a city for a long distance out, right?
May 1st. Take a walk out onto the levee, view the city, and see that it takes but a few buildings in this Western world to make a city. The houses and shops stand along the levee, extending back into the hillsides. The narrow street is literally filled with huge merchandise wagons bound for Santa Fe. The power attached to these wagons is 7 or 8 and sometimes 9 pair of long-eared mules, or as many pair of oxen, with a Mexican driver who wields a whip long enough to reach the foremost pair, and who does not hesitate to use it with severity and a noise too. Large droves of cattle are driven into town to be sold to immigrants who, like us, are going into the territory. Our husbands are all out today buying oxen, provisions, and cooking utensils for our ox wagon journey into the territory. This is the anniversary of my wedding day, and as I review the past pleasant years as they have passed, one after another, until they now number 11, a shadow comes over me as I try to look away into the future and ask, what is my destiny? Away with all these shadowings. We shall be very busy this year in making our home comfortable so that no time can be spared for that dreaded disease, homesickness, to take hold of us. And we mean to obey physical laws, thereby securing to ourselves strength of body and vigor of mind.
Let's pause for a moment and write down at level 1. That term is homesickness, and it makes sense. See, the last time, we can ask this at 3B, the last time that you went somewhere and then you kind of missing mom, dad, you were missing home or whatever, that little bit of homesickness kind of thing. You maybe had to move from a town that you once lived in and you had to come, for example, here or elsewhere. That we understand is homesickness, right, and how wretched an experience that is. But can we say something out loud? If you want to, you can go back and visit that place, especially once you get to be a certain age when you can drive yourself or whatever, right? But we're talking about an experience where she will never go back east. Coming out here, she won't. Her life is going to be forever changed. And are you ready for this? She has no idea what's coming. Zero. No clue of any kind. Survival is going to be really tough. Any of you that have ever been around oxen or mules, you know how hard it is to do that project, right?
May 2nd, a lovely day.
Top of page
Our
619.
husbands are
Read
loading
it close.
the wagons. Women and children walk along up the hill out of this great city, wait under a tree. What a beautiful country is spread out before us. Will our Kansas scenery equal this? 1 mile from the city, and Dr. Thorne has broke his wagon tongue. It must be sent back to Kansas City to be mended. Fires kindled, women cooking, supper eaten, sitting round on logs, stones, and wagon tongues. This, I am sure, is a picnic. We expect picnic now all the time. We are shaded by the horse chestnut, sweet walnut, and spreading oak. Flowers blooming at our feet, and grasshoppers in profusion hopping in every direction. This is summertime.
And again, you have to laugh knowing what you know about this country. May 2nd. This is summertime. And for those of us that live out here, we know May 2nd is nothing compared to July 2nd. There's a little bit difference. Notice also, how far did they get out of Kansas City before they got jacked for the first time? Did you see it? 1 mile outside of Kansas City, their first break up of their of a tongue of one of their wagons. So what do? Well, they have to take it all the way back 1 mile back to Kansas City. Question: what will they do 50 miles outside of Kansas City when something breaks? What do? Got no phone capabilities, and you got no idea where you're going. Right? This is going to only get more challenging. Watch.
May 3rd. The women and children who slept in their wagons last night got a good drenching from the heavy shower. It was fortunate for mother, sister, myself, and children that lodgings were found for us in a house. My husband said not a raindrop found him. He had the whole wagon to himself, besides all of our Indian blankets. Father, it seems, fell back a little and found a place to camp in a tavern, not a hotel, where he fell in with the scores of Georgians who loaded a steamer and came up the river the same time that we did. He said he had to be very shrewd indeed not to have them find out that he was a Free States man. These bandits have been sent in here and will commit all sorts of depredations on the Free State settlers, and no doubt commit many a bloody murder. Have passed Westport, the foothold for border ruffianism. The town looks new, but the hue is dingy. Our drivers use their goads to hurry up the oxen's heavy tread, for we felt somewhat afraid, for we learned the Georgians had centered here. Here, too, came in the Santa Fe and Indian trade, so here may be seen the huge Mexican wagon, stubborn mule, swarthy driver with his goad-like whip, and the red man of the prairie on his fleet Indian pony laden with dried meat, furs, and buffalo robes.
One of the interesting differences about coming out west is that you have the convergence. You'll want to put this in your notes. You have the convergence of different peoples. You have people from Georgia, a slave state, who are coming out into this territory trying to fight against what were called the Free Staters, Americans who believed that this area should be free from slavery. This was a huge debate during the American Civil War and even beyond, which states out here would allow for slavery. And the argument was, by some, none. This is going to be a slave-free region. You have people coming from slave areas that say, whoa, 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 way wrong answer. We need to continue to have the same freedom to own slaves in the South out here. On top of that, you have large numbers of people who have come up from the area that we, of course, today know of as Central America. Mexico and other regions as well, who come up into this region, and they as well claim rights to these territories. They are predominantly as well migratory peoples, following especially the population of horse and livestock rearing. So for example, you got this convergence. So you got native peoples who live on the lands, you got the individuals who are coming up from the Mexico area, and now you got this convergence of all these white people coming out from the east, making areas like Kansas City and other outlying areas a fascinating hodgepodge of all these different kinds of peoples, all these different kinds of cultures, right, that are going to arrive at the same time.
What? Fast in the mud and with our wagon tongue broke?
Last paragraph on
Yes,
619.
to be sure. So a long time is spent before my husband and Dr. House can put our vehicle in moving order again. Meanwhile, we women folks and children must sit quietly in the wagon to keep out of the rain. Lunch on soda biscuit, look at the deep black mud in which our wagon is set, and inhale the sweet odor that comes from the blossoms of the crabapple trees that are blooming in sheets of whiteness along the roadside. May 6th.
Let's pause for a moment and add this. These people think it's summertime. Of course, you're talking May 4th, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're talking the early part of May. And you know what kind of rain. We just had some of this, didn't we, just recently, where it rains and rains and rains. Of course, the ground starts to get saturated with this rain, and then you're pulling a really heavy wagon with horses. Once you hit mud and you get stuck, the question is, how do you get out? Again, women and children. You're bringing out here, going, hey, we're going to go out there and it's going to be great. We're going to build this farm or this commune or whatever. No idea what's coming at all. All right, here we go. Let's finish this project up.
Dined on the prairie and gathered flowers.
Top of
while
page
our
620.
tired beasts filled themselves with the fresh green grass. Have driven 18 miles today. So here we are, all huddled into this little house, 12 by 16. Cook supper over the fire. Fill the one bed lengthwise and